Welcome to this week's edition of Awaken Your Soul. I'm Lauren Cabalden.
And I'm Shannon Hibble.
And this week we are going to talk about social media and mental health.
I'd like to start off by just talking about why it's even important to talk about social media. I believe that it's something that we inevitably have to talk about because it is affecting everyone. We are seeing just our teens and our young ones, just everyone is using a phone. I mean, I go to dinner and I see a family and they all have their phones out and no one's really interacting with each other. You know, you're sitting in a bus or you're sitting in a public area and everyone's on their phone. They're no longer really interacting with each other. And so it's just a different way of being.
Yeah, I think it's important that we address social media. Obviously, a lot of us are on our phones. I think 75% of Americans are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I mean, we are. And I think it's important to acknowledge that it's not evil. It's not a negative thing to always be on your phone. I actually had somebody come up to me the other night when I was at dinner and I was talking to a family member about something important on my phone. And he actually came up to me and said, "Get off your phone and be in the present." And it's interesting because I think that sometimes when I see other people on their phones that they're somewhere else other than in the here and now. But it's also interesting that sometimes our phones can be vehicles of keeping us present or mindful or engaged. I think recently there was an SAT question for one of the essay questions that asked high schoolers, is technology bringing us closer together or pushing us further apart? And I think that dichotomy, we can't go back in time. We're not going to get rid of technology. But I think what's happening now is an evolution of technology and we need to acknowledge it. I think there's a lot of wonderful things about it. It's bringing clinicians together with clients that might not ever want to leave the house.
Well, I think it's doing both.
It's doing both.
Yeah,
it's
pushing away and bringing together.
Absolutely. It's not the thing in of itself. It's how we use it. So I think it's important that we talk about that, and that's going to be our topic today.
Yeah, I like to go off of that we're not demonizing social media. We're not demonizing, the use of cell phones. And it can either disconnect us from others or it can actually connect us. And so we don't want to say, just get off social media whatsoever. So I want to kind of talk about that. But yes, you might ask, when is it a problem, right? When is it a problem to be on your phone when you're at dinner with your family? When is it a problem, that you have to actually address? And so I think it would be really important to kind of look within. I mean, there are tests out there, and I think Lauren can speak to that a little bit, but that actually can determine whether or not you have a problem, according to some assessments. But even I'd like to say that it's important also to look within. And one of the things that you can do with that is, okay, am I feeling connected with myself and with others? And how can you really tell that? I felt like I was really connected, with myself until I went to therapy. And then I realized, wow, I'm really disconnected from myself and from others. I didn't really realize that. And, if you watched our first episode, we talked about the unconscious. And so it's so important to, see a therapist that can call you out on your unconscious and your stuff in order for you to recognize what's really going on. And part of that is also with social media. People are in denial. They don't recognize, how disconnected they are from others, but it comes out with substance abuse and with depression and anxiety, right? So we want to look at these symptoms. If someone's depressed or is anxious or is showing up to school or work and having social anxiety, feeling like they don't belong, feeling like everything that they're saying is being judged and being hypervigilant, right? We want to recognize that because that can lead to disconnection. And oftentimes social media and active experiences on social media can even heighten those experiences of social rejection. And so you just want to look at, how are you doing? because just like anything, like alcohol is not in itself a bad thing, or any substances necessarily are bad in of themselves. But what is bad is actually how we use them to cope, right? And deal with the symptomology of depression, anxiety.
I've always said that the root of depression in my eyes is comparison. And if you think of primitive societies, and there's still a few left in this world, if we really take a good look at them, there probably is not much diagnosable generalized anxiety disorder or major depressive disorder. And a lot of that is because it's quite a homogeneous society. The village is taking care of the children. There's not comparison of what car you drive, what watch you have, what purse you own. And a lot of times social media on the negative side can be a really quick kind of feed of quick comparison. And a lot of it depends on our mindset. So if I'm looking at things and I'm already depressed, it'll heighten my depression. And there's a lot of research that shows this. Teenagers that are already happy and okay with themselves, if they're looking at their friends, getting a new car or going on a great vacation or looking happier in a new relationship, it's always going to be the highlight reel of someone's life. If you're already happy, then you can have a genuine happiness for others. It's easier to do that. But if you're already struggling or have a baseline where you don't feel seen, heard, loved in the world, you're automatically going to compare yourselves, and it's going to be more of the inferiority complex that comes up. So how we are before we get into the social media is really important. And I think for me, it's how you use it, the relationship to it, but it has an addictive effect of, that dopamine boost when we get a like, when we get a good comment. I know there was a lot of anxiety recently of Instagram letting go of the like option, and a lot of controversy about how people's careers are built on building the likes, building the followers, and there's a lot of controversy on that. But I think it's neither good nor bad. Maybe so, maybe not. Nothing in this world is good or bad.
Well, if you think about it, yeah. I mean, even with the likes, if you think about it, that's already happening even without social media.
Exactly.
Let's take social media out.
Right.
You get a hit of dopamine when someone shows you a compliment or just in their facial expression shows that they like you, right? So, what Facebook and Instagram have done in these social media outlets, they've actually taken psychological principles and just put a like symbol, right? And so it's already happening. So it's not that it's bad in of itself. It's more what it's going to do is it's going to heighten what already exists. So if you already have a fear of rejection, it's going to heighten that. If you already compare yourself to people at a level that creates depression and anxiety, then it's going to heighten that. So I think that's what you're talking about is it's not bad of itself. It's more about what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I can say for me personally, I've had to do a detox of it because I think my goal I always have to, what's my motivation for being on here right now? Why? And I really had to question myself on that because I noticed sometimes I would be on it more when I was feeling down to get some sort of up effect, whether it was interaction with others. And okay, is that bad? Like to connect, right? When I'm feeling down, I want to connect a little bit with others. But am I replacing that quick connection on technology for something that I should be doing? Is it more authentic to do it in person or to call or text or meet up with somebody? But I realize how I'm using it and detoxing anything that doesn't serve me, which I think when we're asking ourselves, how can we use social media more mindfully? I've started, just following like positive quotes or like interesting recipes or, just things that feed my soul a little bit more. And when I go through that in the morning versus, individuals that I know that maybe rant or can be really pessimistic or, are looking for validation on social media. Once I detoxed my feeds, I really got a better perspective and I feel more connected, and it's more to see what events are going on or what people are doing things in my area that I can connect with. And so really asking yourself, why am I on here? How much time am I spending? And when I'm on here, is it taking me away from the present moment or is it deepening something that an experience I want to have with someone on the phone? And
is escape bad though?
Is escape bad? What is
Honestly,
escape? Right?
Because we can even talk about Netflix and binging on Netflix, right? And is that necessarily unhealthy to check out?
Yep.
That's a question.
Absolutely.
Right? Because I know some healthy people that check out, that need to turn off their brains in order to just check out for a second.
Oh, I have binge watched The Office, and I think that is the healthiest thing I've done some weekends.
Last Kingdom.
And that, having that escape where you can be mindless and kind of step into somebody else's world or something, just fantasy or comedy is
reading
cool.
a book. Reading a book, you get lost in it. You get lost in reading a book.
Yep.
And so that's another thing is how do you determine getting lost in something or escaping and turning your brain off? When does it become unhealthy? When does it do a disservice?
Right.
And if I can be honest, I wish I could just say, okay, this is how many times. If you're going over this amount, then that means that you are addicted to social media. But that's not the case. It really is about each individual and really looking within each moment, each time and being mindful. So we talk about mindfulness, and that's a buzzword that I want to explain a little bit more about what that means. Being mindful means to look within, to be mindful of what you're thinking, what you're feeling in the moment. So I think Lauren was just talking about that, what is being mindful of, okay, why am I going on social media right now? I think for a lot of people, people who are bored, right? All of a sudden they're bored and they don't really have much to do. And then that's their literally automatic response is to go on social media, right? Recognizing that is important because that can show how automatic it is. That means you're not being mindful, and that's more of you're going toward, I'm not saying you are addicted, but you're going toward maybe a little bit more of that disconnection from yourself because you don't have as much control over your decision to go on to social media.
Some of you out there might think, okay, these girls are talking about social media a lot, and I've already checked my Facebook 5 times during this conversation. So how can you tell if you have a problem? And social media disorder is actually not necessarily a diagnosable disorder in the DSM, in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. But what clinicians are doing now is actually putting it in the same category as almost like an anxiety disorder, an impulse disorder. So if you're asking yourself, do I have this addiction? Do I have a problem? It really is kind of overlaid with some of the same assessment questions that we may ask someone that has an addiction or that has social anxiety disorder. So some of those questions might be, is social media getting in the way of things I want to do that bring me other pleasure, right? Am I thinking about social media, for more than 50% of the time if I'm not on it? Am I constantly planning if I'm in situations that I can't access my phone or computer? Am I constantly planning when I can do that? And I don't feel okay until I can do that. I had that experience once when I was on vacation in Bali, and I've been really working through taking pictures and being on social media and being in the present moment. But it's fascinating because I went once with my brother and he was like, I'm so glad that you took all these pictures because now I have access to these memories. And then I'd share them with my friends, and it was more of a experience of sharing and togetherness rather than escape. And so I was being more mindful of not necessarily taking the perfect picture, but, just, that intimate relationship with your phone and then being present at the same time and not freaking out if I didn't get the right selfie or something. But it's those questions of, how much is this interfering with my life? Are things becoming unmanageable? Am I choosing to opt out of activities because of it? Am I doing it more as a escape from reality? Am I looking at social media more when I break up with my girlfriend or my boyfriend and I want to get some kind of validation? Is it more for validation, or is it more to kind of, just enhance my knowledge or my growth? And I think those questions are some questions you can ask yourself. And also one thing that I've done, which has been powerful, is sometimes delete the apps and kind of go through, because you know how automatic it is. It's just kind of like smoking or doing something that's habitual. If you delete the app, how many of us actually go on the browser to look at it? So notice Am I, having this impulse to re-download it and just, break that down a little bit, bring some awareness.
Well, that's so similar to detox, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
We're in the field of addiction and mental health. That's what Akua does. And, we have a detox, and that's a detox from the substance, right? From alcohol, heroin, meth, cocaine. And, it's important to detox sometimes when you are feeling this impulse or this habit, or like I was saying, a lack of control over your decision making when using the substance or using social media. And then once that happens, then you can then choose how you want to have that in your life. I'll just use examples of some of the clients that come through here. You see how attached they are to their phones.
Some individuals don't come into treatment because we don't allow electronics. And that's fascinating to me because oftentimes they'll choose a treatment center because of their attachment to electronics.
Right.
So, yeah.
It's almost like they're dying. Like we're telling them that they can't have their phones, and it's like they're dying. And honestly, psychologically, that is what is happening. They do feel like they're dying because it's been proven that actually when you've experienced some kind of disconnection from an attachment figure, or even attachment to a thing like a substance or social media, that actually the wiring in your brain will actually signal you're dying. And what we've also seen is that people will come through here like begging for their phone, and then at the very end of treatment, they're not even wanting their phone back because they're either scared of how it's going to affect them, that they don't want to get lost in it again, and they're scared of how it's going to affect them psychologically. And
a lot of them delete Facebook or Instagram when they get their phones back. We actually, as therapists, process their phone. When we turn their phone back on and give it to them after 30, 60, or 90 days, we actually a lot of times have an actual therapy session with them to reintegrate them now in a healthy way. It's almost like, say your mom, is a toxic influence in your life. You want her around, you love her, but you now have to have a different relationship with her, different boundaries with her. So how do we reintroduce her back into your life now with your new boundaries? Same thing with your phone, right?
Yes. With social media, for instance, it represents something. It represents power, status, likability, belonging, connection. All of those things are good things to have. Autonomy.
Oh yeah.
Right? Self-expression.
And I think Jung would say, he talks a lot about the persona and the shadow. I think he would say that social media is actually a part of our evolutionary growth in the kind of dynamic of creating our persona and our shadow. I think most people know now that what pictures make it to social media is not the full story. It's not the full picture. But it could be somebody's way of working through something. I saw a public figure recently post a lot about his relationship and a lot of pictures that maybe put him in a better light, maybe to boost his own self-esteem or self-worth. And then captions that kind of, I could see it was like his processing to his audience. And, at first I would have been like, oh gosh, this is some, spiritual narcissism stuff. But now as I kind of look at it as a dialogue with the unconscious and dialogue with whoever's out there, it could be a healthy form of self-expression, working with his persona. And persona is like that mask in a play. It's what we show the world. It's not unhealthy necessarily, unless we're too identified with it, that we don't know our shadow, what's behind it. So persona is, you can argue, your Instagram feed. All the pictures that you've chosen to show society. When someone first meets you, what is your Instagram, handle? And that's how I'm going to see you if I don't really know much about you. It's the pictures. Where have you traveled? And what are you interested in? And what do you wear? And how do you express yourself? And
it's hard, though, because as much as we're talking about this and how we don't want to demonize social media, I can't help but have this feeling around it, just because of how much suicide has increased with our teens, how much shootings there's been, and I just wonder, it just has me wonder how much is social media playing into the suicides of our teens, especially with how much I see our teens so connected to social media. And, maybe it's like what we've been talking about is that, that they were unhappy to begin with, and social media just heightens it, right? And, but is it the chicken or the egg, or is it really social media that's leading to more unhappiness and more depression?
Thank you for bringing that up, because I almost feel like, say what you want about Mark Zuckerberg, but his initial purpose for creating Facebook was connection, with college students. And, it's been said, there's a TED Talk that connection is the antidote to addiction. And so it's almost like I always call it like an evolutionary growth. Like social media came out of the need for connection, I believe. And all pathology is going to be expressed through that. And I don't know if anybody has seen on Netflix, there's a new documentary called The Great Hack that's about how our data has kind of been stolen and used in different ways to influence our political choices, and just kind of, and it's fascinating, especially with elections and things like that. And so it's interesting to me how social media can be this great connector, but also underneath that, it's an expression of how the community has also failed in certain ways. The idea that parents have kind of lost control of their children. I almost think that parents are terrified of their children once they become teenagers. And a lot of rites of passage have to do with parents, the elders, bringing, the children into the environment, transitioning them as adults in a healthy way. And I think we've missed that point. So I almost feel like gangs and certain things that might look negative are actually kind of expressions of the, adolescent psyche trying to integrate, and where culture might have failed, and where, there's a lot of intergenerational stuff happening where I think a lot of adults right now are a little bit lost. Because even social media is not something they truly understand. It was really created by millennials. And so it becomes this foreign thing that, is not necessarily...
And foreign leads to bad.
Yep.
Because it's unknown and fearful.
Right.
That must be bad. I'm seeing my child change. It must be because of this.
Right.
And so... to those parents out there that are scared, I totally understand. I get that. And I think my encouragement would be to gain more knowledge about it. Maybe download it yourself to actually get an idea of what's really going on. So instead of it just being all bad, you're actually stepping into their world, better understanding it. And you can have conversations about it, because what's happening, and it's psychologically appropriate for a teen to separate psychologically from their parent and go out and make their own decisions, fail, make their friends, and make choices that parents wouldn't choose for them. And so that's very normal. But for parents to then say, hold that, you're bad, it creates more disconnection. Instead of stepping into their world and better understanding, tell me more about that Instagram post. What's that like for you? Instead of saying, I don't understand you.
So there is actually an assessment online. I think it's 5 to 10 questions. It's really simple, and I believe it's a scale of questions between 0 and 5 that helps you understand if you do have a social media disorder. Again, it's not in the DSM, but it's something that, we define a disorder as something that prevents you from living a manageable and functioning life. And again, we kind of mentioned some of those questions, but is the impulse to use social media getting in the way of what's happening in your reality, in your physical space? And how often are you thinking about it? How often are you obstructed by thoughts of when you can't do it? So it's about those kind of questions. So I highly encourage you, if during this discussion you're thinking to yourself that you might have a problem, to research that. And if you're thinking, what could Akua help me with that? Like we've mentioned, we do not allow clients here to have their electronics until they're in a phase of treatment called intensive outpatient. So there is a detox from electronics going on. But we do help you reintegrate it when you get your phone back. And it's definitely something that I've seen clients really start to appreciate not having it, and having really mindful, deep conversations with individuals they might not normally connect with. A lot of research has shown that even just minimizing your social media use, like I've mentioned, deleting the apps and just trying that for a week, challenging yourself. I have some friends that aren't on it altogether, and they feel a lot happier and more present.
And if you're thinking to yourself, no, I don't need to do that, then that probably means you need to take an assessment that you probably are addicted to social media, because just like with anything, if you can't fathom actually not having it, then that probably means that you're addicted to it.
Yep. And I think just a mindfulness practice, going through what you follow, who you follow, and deleting some people. I did a little bit of that, and sorry to anybody that I deleted. It's not personal. I have love for you, but this is about me. And so being selfish about that, noticing why am I hesitant about unfollowing certain people? And am I caring too much about what they will think?
So if you liked our show, like us.
Please like us. My self-worth depends on it.
And our jobs. Joking, slightly. But if you did like us, please leave comments, like us, and subscribe. We will be back next week, and we look forward to it.